Good day, this is Auns of Troubled Gamers Radio. Today I'm going to be talking about why we accept broken games now. That's not always been the case. In fact, a lot of times in the past, a broken game would not be well accepted at all. A famous example of this would be the horror show that was E.T. for the Atari 2600. But there were several others that can be given as examples, even during the days of the NES and the SNES, as well as the Sega Genesis. Not a lot of broken games were accepted by gamers, although they were shilled to no end by the companies that made them. So, why do we accept them now? Why do we accept buggy crap like Assassin's Creed or Battlefront Day One, or even bugged out remakes like Grim Fandango? I think the answer is we were conditioned to it. We were groomed into it by the publishers and by games journalists who, well, that's a long beaten horse, so I'm not gonna get into it here. But I can think of several examples that were not broken, that were tested thoroughly to make sure there were no bugs before they hit shelves. Partially because they had to be, because there was no patching back even in '95. You got what you got. Now granted, there were some games that ended up being modded as well, even back then. However, those were few and far between. But Day One, any of the Sonic games, games like Lunar, Silver Star Story, this is a limited print. Only 12,000 ever existed of this and its sequel, Eternal Blue. You better believe that this shit was fucking vetted before it hit shelves. And although the bloopers are still in the end, they made sure the dubbing worked, that it fit, that it didn't sound like shit. And the Ultima series, wonderful PC series, although they've had some console releases too. Basically, there would be no Mass Effect. There would be no Skyrim, Elder Scrolls, any of those morality-based games. BioWare would not have worked if it wasn't for this series. This series was one of the first that touched upon morality mechanics in a video game. If you have not played these games and you love RPGs, do yourself a favor and find a way to play them. Just saying. But there were also examples that had some flaws in them that ended up being accepted by the public. Either because they didn't know better, or because the games were just so hyped up. An example of a well hyped up game I can think of, Final Fantasy VII. Why do you think people are accepting this in episodic format for the remake? There's so much hype. But there were flaws in the code. There were flaws in script. We just sweep them under the rug because, hey, you could still get to the end of the game. It wasn't that game breaking, but they were still there. Another game, I love this game. It's a good cult classic, but its dubbing is terrible, and its script is flawed in points. Xenogears. I can think of one point in particular where I don't even think that the text was legible, much less comprehensible. But it still got through. And I think that's the era in which it started. When they saw that if the game seemed good enough to someone, that they'll accept the flaws. They'll accept the problems. That they'll accept that it eventually will become unplayable. And I don't mean unplayable because of bugs. I mean unplayable because of servers. Games like Phantasy Star Universe, several MMOs and FPSs that you can no longer play properly as intended because they depended on server updates and server protections like GameGuard. There's no real way to play the PC version of some of these games anymore, and they're being lost to time. And that is a shame. And I don't think we should accept it. But as long as we do, it's what we're gonna get. Especially if it is stuff like on this DLC. Or games that you need to buy the DLC to get the ending of the game. They're gonna keep doing it as long as we keep accepting it. So we have to start telling them no. We have to start standing up for ourselves as gamers. So, I thank you for your time. And please remember to game freely. Thank you.